What's going on, everyone? I am back, and week 5 is in the books. We have week 6 on the horizon, so you know what time it is. I have got my weekly waiver wire targets for you, and in no particular order, let's get right into it. All right, the first guy on my list is a name that you saw last week in McKinnon, and the reason I have him featured again is because now we know for a fact that he is the lead dog after his Monday night performance. And I know I said no particular order for these guys, but it just happens that he's the first guy that I'm mentioning, and I would prioritize my waiver wire pickups with him as well. Now, you saw what he did versus the Bears. Started out with Latavius Murray, but as McKinnon got more opportunities, he made more out of them. He had more flash plays, more of a factor in the passing game. He had 16 carries for 95 yards, a touchdown, and then on top of that, 6 receptions for 51 yards. So the offense pretty much went through McKinnon that night. And honestly, I think in that one game, even though it was one game, he showed enough to distance himself from Murray. He's more closely resembling Dalvin Cook with his pass catching ability. Maybe not as big of a guy, but still, he knows that system better. And especially in PPR leagues, I think he is a must add. If you can still get him, go for it. He is my number one target for this week. Next, we have got Adrian Peterson, and talk about a guy that has done a lot of moving around in these last couple of months, from the Vikings to the Saints and now to the Cardinals. Obviously, we had the trade the other day, and so how does that impact him? Well, first of all, the Cardinals could not be any worse with the running game, so that's why that addition made sense. Chris Johnson wasn't cutting it, and in fact, he got cut in order for Adrian Peterson to be added. So presumably, Adrian Peterson becomes the lead guy for the Cardinals. Now, still, that offensive line is not where it needs to be for the Cardinals. There's no replacing David Johnson. He masked a lot of holes in that offense with his skill set. If anything, AP is going to be just that pure rusher. He's not going to be really a factor in the passing game, as has always been the case for AP. Now, I kind of talked about this before in my reaction to the news. I think best case scenario, AP is going to be a running back 2, mediocre running back 2, as he is the main guy and gets more opportunities with the Cardinals. I still think that offense has a lot of issues with Palmer on the decline, but I think he's worth adding off of waivers. Give him a week or two, see how he adjusts, and maybe you have found a diamond in the rough. Next, we've got another name from the fallout of this Adrian Peterson trade, and that is Alvin Kamara. Now, I've talked Kamara before, and I've mentioned adding him, and the reason why it's even bigger this week is because with Adrian Peterson gone, he becomes even more so of a factor, both a little bit in the rushing game and as has been in the passing game. So, especially in PPR leagues, try and get him. I know that he might not be available in a lot of leagues, but if he is, definitely a name that you should be going after. And for me, if he is available, he is right under McKinnon in terms of who you should be targeting. To me, he is a younger, faster version of Mark Ingram, and I could see the Saints turning the offense to him in terms of rushing as the season goes on. Now, continuing our list of running backs, we have Elijah Mcguire on the Jets, and I know maybe not the sexiest of names. He is on the Jets. They're not the best of offenses, but still, you've got Forte out, you've got Powell out, so he's the lone guy in there. They're playing the New England Patriots. We all know the struggles they have defensively. Last week, Mcguire had 11 carries, 20 yards, and 2 receptions. Now, some of those carries, I think, a little bit misconstrued because Powell was still in there for a little bit. He'll get more opportunities. And then I will say, in terms of PPR leagues, he won't be as much of a factor as Powell. Not as good of a pass catcher, but he will probably finish with 2 or 3 receptions. Nonetheless, one in the red zone, he will be given opportunities by the Jets. The main question is, will they be in the red zone to begin with? But I think they will have some opportunities. So as far as a name to target on a weekly basis, not this guy, but just for this week while Powell is out, I would go and take a chance on Mcguire, potentially a running back 2 value, maybe a flex guy. Continuing on, we have got a guy that a lot of people are really high on, and that is Marlon Mack of the Colts. He had 9 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown in their win versus the 49ers. And to me, when I watched that game, it was more in a relief role of Forte, only when Forte needed a breather, something like that. And it was, don't get me wrong, an impressive stat line, but a lot of it came on some big plays. And kudos to Mack, because in the limited opportunities he has been given, he has made the most out of them. But look, I think this is Frank Gore's team in terms of the rushing job. He's veteran enough. He has enough respect on that team. And I think everything is going to go through him. I just cannot trust Mack in a relief role. But even with that said, I would invest a waiver wire pickup on him, because more than anything, a lot of people now this season are desperate at the running back position, and they're going to chase that weak previous production, and Mack falls in that category. So to me, he is more of a guy that you pick up and then you turn around and you trade for better value. You've seen it with guys like Deshaun Watson these last 2 weeks, Will Fuller, guys like that. So Mack would be on my radar to get and then flip right back around. Next, I've got a name in Matt Breida from the 49ers that, had a decent game, and in crunch time, when you expected Carlos Hyde to be out there, he wasn't. And when asked why, the coaching staff said, we're going to ride the hot hand. And Breida kind of filled that role. He had 10 carries, 49 yards, 3 receptions, 22 yards. And for me, he is not that starting quality caliber guy, but I would invest a waiver wire pickup in him twofold, because it looks like Hyde is kind of falling out of favor a little bit maybe in San Fran. We know his injury history, if anything. So Breida, if you pick him up, could potentially become a starting guy later on in the season. That's iffy though. The main reason I would pick him up is kind of to my previous point, as a backup to Carlos Hyde. Hyde does tend to get injured. So Breida, we know what the running back situation has looked like this year. An insane amount of injuries, and if you've been unlucky enough to not get your handcuff, then you've suffered a lot with those big name running backs. So kind of as a precautionary tale, if you can, pick up Breida for Carlos Hyde as a backup position. Now, finishing our lengthy list of running backs, I've got Shane Vereen for the Giants, and I know he's not usually the main rusher of the ball. That'll go to Gallman, that'll go to Darkwa, even though Darkwa dealing with an injury right now. But the main reason I have Vereen here is because despite everything, he is a really good pass catcher, and so many of the Giant pass catchers went down. We know about Odell, Brendan Marshall, season-ending injury. Shepard looks like he'll probably miss this week, but he'll be back in the future. So automatically, Vereen becomes a really good pass-catching option. For that reason alone, especially in PPR leagues, I would take a flyer on Shane Vereen, a potential flex guy. And I know he doesn't have a good matchup with the Broncos, but look, if anything, the Broncos have been locking down the rushing game. But to me, I think Eli is going to rely a lot on those short dinks and dumps, so Vereen could be in for a big day PPR-wise. For this week, I have got one receiver that I want to talk about, and that is Roger Lewis, because we know, again, I highlighted the news with Odell Beckham, Brendan Marshall, Shepard. None of those guys are going to be available for the Giants. Sterling Shepard later on, so that leaves Roger Lewis as the main wide receiver. Obviously, Evan Ingram is going to be there as a tight end. Another name that you should look at adding. But with Roger Lewis, to me, as the main wide receiver, he's going to get plenty of opportunities. I think the Giants are going to find themselves down versus the Broncos, so there will be long balls and long shots given to Lewis. He had one catch for about 30 yards and a touchdown last week. Now, this is a very different defense with the Broncos. They've got a stout secondary, so Lewis is admittedly a boomer bust guy, but if you are on the fringe and you need a guy that can set you over the edge, could possibly be Lewis. With Lewis, though, he is more of a following week kind of guy because the matchup is so difficult this week. I would still invest a waiver wire pickup in him because, like I said, after this matchup, it gets a little bit friendlier for him, and without Marshall, without Odell Beckham, he'll be next in line after Shepard. Now, transitioning to our tight ends, it is a tough time for tight ends. We had another injury in Charles Clay. We've got bye weeks to account for starting last week, so who can we get? We saw guys like Ed Dixon blow up last week, but I don't think that'll be something that'll be sustainable. Instead, I am going to highlight a guy like David Njoku on the Browns. He had 3 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown last week, and the Browns making a quarterback change. So to me, I think Njoku can be that security blanket for the new quarterback. And basically, we know a tight end is a new quarterback's best friend because he is reliable, gets those short passes, and I think he can benefit from this. He has been a red zone target when the Browns find themselves in that situation. And I would say take a chance at least this week with Njoku, with a new quarterback in Cleveland. See how that goes, and maybe you have found yourself a serviceable guy, at least as a replacement moving forward. And finally, as always, I have got my defenses for you this week. Wouldn't be a true video without them. So first, I have got the Ravens. They're playing the Bears in Baltimore. So look, we all saw what the Bears did last week versus the Vikings. It was a low-scoring affair. The Ravens, similar to the Vikings, have a very good defense. The rookie quarterback, we saw some turnovers from him, so I think that'll be beneficial. You've got ball hawks in Baltimore, and they'll be able to put pressure on him and force him into mistakes. I think, again, probably a low-scoring game. I would feel pretty safe in saying that the Ravens get at least 1 turnover, and on top of that, maybe a defensive score. And on the flip side, I also like the Atlanta Falcons defense at home versus the Dolphins. And look, Falcons coming off of a bye, had a chance to get a little bit healthy, and they're pissed off from their last loss. And who do they get? Oh yeah, that's right. They get Jay Cutler and that inconsistent Miami offense. So I like them. I think they'll force some turnovers on Jay Cutler, and I think they will get back to their winning ways. I see it as a big blowout for the Falcons, and I think the defense will play a role in that. So with that, we have the end of my list, and as always, let me know what you guys think. Are there names on here that you would add, that you would discard? Do you agree overall with the list itself? And as always, comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in future videos.